B'siyata d'shmai, we're going to learn Yoma Daf Mem Beis. We're going to start 10 lines from the top of Mem Beis Amud Aleph. We saw on Daf Mem Aleph Amud Beis, the first wide line, Omer Rabbi Yitzchok was referring to Shtei L'shonos Shomati. I heard about two strips of red wool, the Paraduma and the Soyer Mishtaleach, and I heard different halachas between them regarding the measure of them. That was the previous sugya. Now, similar to that, again Rabbi Yitzchok, Omer Rabbi Yitzchok, but this time he wasn't talking about the strips of wool, he was talking about shchitois, shtei shchitois shomati. Regarding two different shchitois, I heard, achas shel poro, one is the shchita of the poro aduma, that was done outside the machane, outside Yerushalayim, v'achas shel poro, and one which was the bull of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. And all Rabbi Yitzchok said was that achas ksheira bezar ve'achas psula bezar. One of these two, if a zar, somebody who's a non-kohen, a Yisrael, somebody who's not a kohen, does the shchita, one of them I heard that it's possible, and one of them are kosher. V'lo yodana ha'minayu, says Rabbi Yitzchok, I don't know whether it was the shchita of the parah aduma, which is possible bezar, or the shchita of the parah shel Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim, which is kosher or possible bizarre. Itmar. So we learned shchitas pora upori. Regarding exactly this question, if a zar does the shchita regarding the pora aduma and the pora shel Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim, was a machlekas Rav Shmuel. We don't yet know who said what, but Chad Omar, one of them said pora psuloi poroi ksheira, that the pora aduma that's shechted by a zar is possible, and the power of the Kohen Gadol is kosher. V'chad Omar, and the other one said the opposite, paroi psula pora ksheira, that the power of the Kohen Gadol is possible if it's done with a zar, but the pora aduma is kosher. And the Gemara says, "Tistayim, I'll bring you proof to Rav hu de Omar pora psula." That it's Rav who says that the pora aduma, which is shechted by a zar, is possible. The Omar Abzera. The Abzera said in the name of Rav as follows: Shchitas pora bezar psula. It was said explicitly in the name of Rav that the shchitas, that if a pora aduma is shechted by a zar, it's possible. V'omar Rav Allah, and Rav explained what would be the source for that, because it says regarding pora aduma, it says v'nasatem oisa el Elazar HaKohen, you should give it to Elazar HaKohen. V'hoitzi oisa l'mechutz l'machane v'shachat oisa lefonov. It's given to Elazar HaKohen. He was a Kohen. And in another pasuk it says, the pasuk before this, also regarding the pora aduma, it says Zois chukas hatayra, that, and then it says Ashetziva Hashem lemer dabel b'nei Yisrael veikchu elecha pora aduma tumimo. That means the halachas of pora aduma are considered chukah. And the word chukah means it's essential. It must be done exactly the way it says it. And since it says in the next pasuk, in pasuk Gimel, it says v'nosata isa el Elazar HaKohen, that the pora aduma is given to Elazar HaKohen, and it says chukah, it must be, says Rav, that Elazar HaKohen or any kohen has to shecht the pora aduma, and if a zara shechts the pora aduma, it's possible. Asks the Gemara, V'Rav, you Rav, who said that a pora aduma that's shechted by a zar is possible, because it says Elazar and it says chukah, and you Rav say that the pora shel Kohen Gadol shechted by a zar is kosher, ma'ishna pora dichsiv Elazar v'chukah pora nami. Let's look at the psukim by the power, the bull of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Oksiv, it says in the pasuk, it says v'hikriv Aaron es parachatos asher loi, that it says there that the bull was given, that Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, is the one that brought the bull, and it says chukah. And it says later on at the end of the parasha of the Avodas Yom Kippurim, it says that all these halachas, all these psukim are considered a chukah. So you see it says that Aaron v'chukah. So why do you not determine from there that a zar that shechts the pori shel Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim, it's possible? What made you Rav say that the shchita of the pora aduma is possible bizarre and not the shchita of the parah shel Kohen Gadol? Answers the Gemara, shchita lav avodahi. In contrast to everything else that's mentioned in the parasha of the Avodas Yoma Kippurim in Perek Tezayin in Parashat Acharei Mos, where everything is called an avodah, shchita is not considered an avodah. Asks the Gemara, pora nami, pora aduma is also not considered an avodah. Nothing that's done with the pora aduma is considered avodah. It was done outside Yerushalayim. Avodah is only in the Beis Hamikdash. Says the Gemara, no. Shani Pora de Koche Bedek Habayisi. Everything about a Pora Aduma is not Kedushas Haguf, it's only Kedushas Bedek Habayis. It belongs to the Beis HaMikdash, but it's not Hekdush as in Korbonis. And therefore, regarding Pora Aduma, there's no difference between the Shlita and everything else that's done with the Pora Aduma. And therefore, the chukah, the word chukah that's spoken about in the parish of Pora Aduma, we have no issue that it's also referring, or we assume that it's also referring to the shlita, that it's ma'akav, that a kohen has to do it. However, regarding the Pori Shel Yom Kippurim, where over there, all the avodas, everything done with the par is called avodah, and chukah is referring to all those avodas, and shlita is not considered an avodah. Asks the Gemara of Lav, kol de keinu? Is it not a type of a kol shekain? That if you say that chukah by the power of the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur is not referring to shchita, that the chukah by Pora Aduma should be referring to shchita, would that make sense that chukah, that there should be a pasuk that tells us that it's essential for a Kohen to do something even though it's not hektish at all? Even by hektish itself, in the Beis HaMikdash, the shchita of the Paruk Shel Kohen Gadol, you're saying that chukah does not say that it's essential that a Kohen does it. Would it make sense? Would we have any source that chukah should say that something which is not an avodah is essential to be done by a Kohen? Omer Shisha Bered Rabbi, he says, yes, I'll bring you another example of this. Midi dehava amaris negoim. We know there's a halacha of tzoras. If somebody has a tzoras, he has to call the kohen has to look at it and say whether it's a nega, whether it's tomei or not tomei. Over there, delav avodahi, over there, seeing and determining the status of the tzoras and the matzera is not avoda, uboyakuna, nonetheless, it's essential that a kohen does it. And in the same way as maris negoim is essential that a kohen does it, even though it's not an avoda, so to Pora Aduma, it's essential that the kohen does it, even though it's not an avodah. And now the Gemara continues with Shmuel. If we say that Rav is the opinion that says that Shchita Zor b'Pora Aduma is possible and by Pora Shel Kohen Gadol is kosher, Shmuel must be the opinion who says the other way around, that by Pora Aduma Shchita Zor is kosher and the Pora Shel Yom Kippurim the Shchita of a Zor is possible. Ule Shmuel d'Oma Pora Psula. What would be the source of Shmuel that the shchita of the power of the Kohen Gadol, if it's done by a Zor, is possible? Is because it says in the pasuk, it says, as we mentioned this before, it says in the pasuk Aaron, and it says in the pasuk Chukah. And Rav also knew that, just Rav said shchita is not called an avodah. But Shmuel will hold that the Chukah by the Porish Shel Kohen Gadol is referring to that the shchita is possible b'Zor. So when it says Aaron, it says Chukah. It's possible. And the Gemara is now asking the question on Shmuel, as we asked before in Rav, just the other way around. Ma'ishna poroi dichsiv aroin v'chuka, poronami, regarding Pora Aduma, hoksiv it says Elazar v'chuka, which, and this was actually the source for Rav, that shchita of a Pora Aduma is possible bizarre. What does Shmuel do with that? Why does he assume that Aaron and Chukah, by the power of the Kohen Gadol, is pasel zazar? And why would the same not be true by the Pora Aduma? Answers the Gemara, we have a special posuk by the Pora Aduma that seems to tell us that it's kosher bizarre. Shani Hasam, it says in the posuk, V'shochat oisa lefonov, that the Pora Aduma is actually shechted in front of the Kohen, when the Kohen is watching. What does that mean? Sheyehei zor sheichet, anybody else can shecht, ve'lozar roya, and the Kohen will be watching, and that suffices. So Shmuel says, I've got a pasuk that tells us that shchita by Pora Aduma is kosher bizarre, and by the Pora Shel Yom Kippurim, it says Aaron and Chukah, that Zor is not allowed to do the shchita. Asks the Gemara of Rav, what's Rav going to do with this word lefonov? Rav says that the shchita of a Zor is possible by Pora Aduma. Does it not say v'shochat oisa lefonov? Answers the Gemara, Shelefonov doesn't mean in front of who it's being done. Rav says that it's the Kohen who has to do the Shchita. The Shochat Oisa, and you Kohen who are doing the Shchita, make sure it's Lefonov. What does it mean Lefonov? Sheleyasiach daitu mimeno. Do not get distracted from it at all. Make sure that you're constantly focusing your attention on the Pora Aduma. Or Shmuel. According to Shmuel, who says that the shchita is ksheira bizarre by Pora Aduma, but how does he know sheleyasiach daitu minole? How does he know that the Kohen is not allowed to distract his attention from what's going on with the Parah Aduma? Answers the Gemara, Nafkalemi v'soraf es hapara le'enov. There's another pasuk that says that he will burn the Parah Aduma le'enov, in front of his eyes, in front of the watchful eyes of the Kohen. So le'enov tells us that, and according to Shmuel, that the Kohen is not allowed to distract himself from the whole procedure done with the Parah Aduma. Rav, who learns from Lefonov that one's not allowed to distract oneself, what does he do with Le'enov? Rav says, Chad b'shchita, v'chad b'sreifa. Shmuel says once Le'enov is enough, because Shmuel learns from Lefonov that shchita zor is kosher by a parah, and from Le'enov he learns that the Kohen is not allowed to be masiach das. Rav, who doesn't say that shchita zor is kosher, he says it's possible because it says elozor v'chuka. So he learns from Lefonov and from Le'enov that you're not allowed to be masiach das. The question is, why didn't he need to say it twice? Utzricha, we need it twice. Because of rachmona b'shchita, because Lefonov, v'shochat oisa Lefonov, is regarding shchita. The Le'enov is talking about the Sreifa. If it would only say once, if it would only say V'shochat oisa Lefonov by the Shchita, I would have thought Mishum de Tchilas Avodah, since it's the beginning of the Avodah, therefore you're not allowed to distract oneself. It has to be without Hesach Hadas. But I may have thought Avot Sreifa, maybe when it comes to the Sreifa, where it's not the beginning of the Avodah, one's allowed to have Hesach Hadas. Maloi, I would have thought it doesn't need full concentration. Tzricha, that's why it says by the Sreifa, V'soraf es hapara le'enov. V'yikos of Rachmana b'Sreifa, and if it would only say it by Sreifa, we won't take it for granted that if Sreifa needs le'enov, needs full concentration, then even more so the Shchita, which is Tchilas HaAvodah. No, because I may have said, Mishum dehashta hu de miskasher para. I may have thought, since the whole purpose of the burning of the Parah Aduma, the whole purpose of making the Parah Aduma is only in order you should have the ashes, I may have thought it's the burning which is the main part of this, creating the ashes. That's where you need that there should be no Hesach Hadas. Aval Shchita, but Shchita, which is just a sort of a preparation for that, I may have thought that one is allowed to have Hesach Hadas, Tzricha. That's why it says in the pasuk that also by shchita v'shochat oisa Lefonov that he must not be masiach das. And now the Gemara is assuming that, at least according to Rav, that it says le'enov and it says Lefonov, that shchita and the sreifa have to be done without any hesach hadas. We assume that it's to the exclusion of some other part of the procedure done with the Parah Aduma. Le'mu'utei is to exclusion of some other part of the Avodah. Before we carry on, what are the various stages of making the Parah Aduma? So there are 9 stages. That means there's 8 stages in the preparation, and then there's the last one, which is the actual sprinkling of the water and the Parah Aduma onto the people who are Tomei. What are the 8 stages? There's Shchita, then which is shechting the Parah Aduma. There's Kabbalah, receiving the blood. There's sprinkling the blood facing the Kodesh Kedoshim, even though it was done outside Yerushalayim, it was done facing the Beis Hamikdash. Then 4 was the burning of the Parah Aduma. 5 is throwing in the cedar, the azov, and the wool, throwing it into the fire. That's number 6. Sorry, that's number 5. Number 6 is collecting the ashes and pounding it and making it into a collection of very small pieces of ash. Then you've got filling up the water. The kli has to be filled up with water, and then there's mixing the ashes with the water. Those are the 8 stages of the Parah Aduma, and after that they would take from the water with the ashes, mix in it, and sprinkle it on the Tomei person. So the question is, part number 1, which is the Shchita. Part number 4, which is the Sreifa, we know it has to be done in front of the Kohen with the full concentration of the Kohen. The question now is, what doesn't need to be done? What about the stages after the Sreifa? What have you got after the Sreifa? You've got throwing in the Azov, the Aguda, the bundle with the wood, the grass and the wool. That's 1. And afterwards you've got another 3 stages, which is the collecting of the ashes, filling up of the water, and the mixing of the water with the ashes. The question is, which of those 4 stages do not need the kohen to be watching it? Ilema, are you going to say that it's the last 3 asifas afro, this collecting of the ashes, umilumayim, and filling up the utensil with water, and lekiddush, and the last stage, which is mixing the water with the ashes? That don't say that over there you're allowed to have hesach hadas. It says explicitly in the pasuk lemishmeres lemei nida, which seems to be that you have to focus and guard and watch the whole process until it's ready to be sprinkled, which includes these last 3 stages. Elolim ute. When do we assume, which part of the procedure do we assume is allowed to have hesach hadas? It must be that one stage between the burning and all this, and what is that? Hashlochas eitz erev ve'eze v'shnitoilas. It's the throwing in of the bundle into the fire. Delav gufa de poraninu. It's not something which is done with the actual pora aduma. It's done with something external. Over there we say that it's allowed to be done even without the full concentration of the kohen. Continues the Gemara. Itmar shchitas pora. This is something we discussed before. Whether shchitas pora bezor, if a zor, somebody who's not a kohen, does the shchita of the pora aduma, we said that according to Shmuel it's kosher, according to Rav it's possible. Here you have a few other chachomim who are arguing. Rabbi Omar ksheira. Rabbi says like Shmuel it's kosher. Rabbi Yitzchok nafcha Omar psula like Rav. Rabbi Yitzchok nafcha says it's possible. Ulo Omar ksheira. Some say in the name of Ulo that it's kosher like Shmuel. V'amar lo psula, and others say that it's possible. Mosiv Rabbi Yeshua bar Abba l'siyui l'Rav. Now the Yeshua bar Abba is going to bring a brisa that seems to be proof to Rav that a zor who shechts from the pora aduma, that is possible. Einli elo hazoas meimeo. So now we're going to discuss as follows. We have the 8 stages of preparing the pora aduma. Shchita, kabbalah, azor, sreifa, hashlochas agudo. That's 5. The first 5 stages is up until throwing the bundle into the fire. And then once it's been burnt, you've got the last 3 stages, which is collecting the ashes, filling up the water, and mixing the water with the ashes. So those are the 8 stages before sprinkling, and then you've got the sprinkling of the water itself, which happens afterwards. So and what we're going to discuss now is primarily two points. Number 1, is a woman allowed to do any of these 8 or 9 parts, and are any of these 9 parts allowed to be done at night? And then afterwards we're going to bring proof to the first of the 9, which is the shchita, whether we have any proof regarding a zor, whether somebody who's not a kohen can shecht. Do we have proof from this whole discussion to zor? So how does it go? It goes like this. Einli elo hazoas meimeo. Going to stage number 9, actually sprinkling the water. Over there we take it for granted, and it is learned from psukim she'ein ksherim be'isha, that a woman is not allowed to sprinkle the water onto somebody who's tomei kabe'ish. A woman cannot do it like a man. It's because it says in the pasuk v'lokach eizoi v'toval b'mayim ish toher ve'im ksherim elo bayoim, and it's only kosher in the day, as it says in the pasuk hu yischato boy bayoim hashlishi. So stage number 9, which is what happens to the water after it's prepared, when you sprinkle it onto the tomei people, cannot be done not by a woman and not at night. Menayin l'rabois, the first 5. How do we know that the first 5 stages of preparing the pora aduma also are possible for a woman to do them and possible at night? Shchita, v'kabolas doma, the receiving of the blood, v'azoas doma, sprinkling the blood, usrifosa, and burning it, v'hashlochas eitz erez, v'eze v'shnitoilas. How do we know that all those also are not allowed to be done by a woman? How we know it's not allowed to be done by a woman? I don't really need a pasuk, because if you look in the psukim itself, on each one of these 5 it says either elazar or hakoyin. It's explicit. It has to be done by a male, by a man. However, how do you know they cannot be done at night? Talmud Lema says in the pasuk Torah, that the pasuk says zois chukas haTorah, which seems there's a single Torah, there's a single halacha that applies to all the halachas of pora aduma. And in the same way as part number 9, sprinkling the water, cannot be done by night, so too none of these first 5 parts of the preparing of the pora aduma can be done at night. Yochel shani marbe, I may have thought that also the last three, af asifas aporo afra, collecting the ashes, umilui maim v'kiddush, I may have thought that those also cannot be done by a woman and cannot be done at night. No. Talmud leima zois. The pasuk says zois chukas Torah, that these halachas only apply here and not here. But the Torah doesn't tell us where's here and where's here. What makes you say that? Let's talk about the night. What makes you think that, or how would you assume that the first 5 stages cannot be done at night? Because Torah, it's the same halacha as the sprinkling itself, which cannot be done at night from a pasuk, and the other 3 can be done at night. Maybe it's the other way around. Rabbi says elu ulehoitzias elu. Says the Gemara, since the Torah just said Torah means other parts of the procedure have the same halachas as, for example, the sprinkling cannot be done at night. And it says zois, which means it only applies to some, not to others. And the pasuk explicitly seems to say parts of the halachas can be done at night, parts not. And the Torah doesn't tell us which ones. That means the Torah leaves it up to the Chachmei Yisrael to decide what's the most logical. Omrus, therefore, we're going to say as follows: Hare anu lemeidim kulam me'azoas meimeo. We learn all of them from the sprinkling of the water. Ma'azoas meimeo. Since regarding sprinkling of the waters of the paraduma, it's an explicit pasuk, cannot be done by a woman and not at night. So too I assume from Torah that shchitasa v'kapolas dama v'azdoas dama svefosa v'shlochas eitz erev v'ezei v'shnitzei las, the first 5, hoil v'ein ksherim b'isha. Since it's explicit in the Torah, it says either a lozor or a kohen, that they cannot be done by a woman. So the psukim themselves already put the first 5 parts of preparing the paraduma in the same bracket as sprinkling the waters, that none of them can be done by a woman. The sprinkling, it says, v'lokach ezei v'tovar b'mayim ish tohir, only a man, not a woman. Regarding the first 5 stages, it says explicitly either a lozor or a kohen. So we already know that the first 5 are similar to the sprinkling of the water. So we say, so too, Torah Achas, when it says that there's a similar halachas, is telling us that those 5 are also similar to sprinkling of the water in regards to night, in the same way as the waters cannot be sprinkled at night, as it says, so too the first 5 parts of the preparing cannot be done at night. And therefore and I exclude the last 3, asifas afra umilui mayim v'kiddush hoilu ksherim b'isha. Since there it doesn't say any psukim that would exclude a woman from being able to do it, so we assume that from the word zois it tells us that ksherim nami bayoim u'balaylo, it's also kosher at night, not only by day. So what do we see from this brisa? That shlita of a paraduma is not allowed to be done by a woman. So we assume that in the same way as shlita cannot be done by a woman, it cannot be done by a zor either. So we have proof to Rav, who says that the shlita of a zor is possible by paraduma. And it's a proof against Shmuel, who says that the shlita of a zor is kosher by paraduma. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. V'hai mai tiyufta. What sort of question is this against Shmuel and proof to Rav? Are you going to say, Mida psulim be'isha, psulim nami bazar? Are you going to say that from the fact that it was possible for a woman to do the shchita, it's also possible, we assume it to be possible by a zar? That's no proof. Hazas mimeimo. Let's go to stage number 9, sprinkling the water. It's possible by an isha, as we saw, ish tohir. However, it's clear that a zar is allowed to sprinkle from the waters onto the Tomei people. Hazas mimeimo teichiach shepsulim beisha uksherim bezar. So the fact that you see that the shchita is possible beisha doesn't tell us it's possible bezar. Maybe it's kosher bezar. No proof to Rav. No proof against Shmuel. Omar Rabbi says, I'll explain it to you. I'll explain to you what the question is against Shmuel and the proof to Rav, because does it actually mention Elazar or Kohen by the Shchita? Where do you see by Shchita that it's possible by an Isha? who says that a woman's not allowed to do the shlita? But all the others, the Kabbalah, Hazos, Reifen, Ashlochas, Aguda, there it says explicitly it's done either by a Lazar or the Kohen, it's done by a male. Where by shchita does it say it's done by a male? Let's read the Chumash. V'nesatem oisa el Elazar HaKohen, v'hoitzi oisa el mechutz lamachne, v'shochat oisa lefonov. Does it say that Elazar is shechting it? It says v'shochat oisa lefonov. So where do you see that a woman is not allowed to shecht it? So it must be that b'shochat oisa means that Elazar is the one that has to do the shchita, and since Elazar has to do the shchita, that means a woman is not allowed to do the shchita. Elazar was not a woman. A man has to do the shchita. That means that this Brisa is learning the pasuk like Rav learned the pasuk, that b'shochat oisa is referring to Elazar, that he's the one that shechts it, and that the price is bringing proof to that an isha is pasul, and the Gemara is bringing proof to that if you read the pasuk that v'shochat oisa means that Elazar shechts it, I've got proof like Rav. The Rav says Elazar has to shecht it and not the Zor. According to Shmuel, how do you read that pasuk? V'shochat oisa, it should be shechted by anybody lefonov, in front of the Kohen. According to that reading, you'd have no proof that a woman is not allowed to shecht it, like you have no proof that a Zor is not allowed to shecht it. So from this brisa that learns v'shochat oisa means that Elazar shechts it, proof to Rav that a Kohen has to shecht it and not a Zor. Hainu tufti isha mai tama. What would be the source that a woman is not allowed to shecht it? Elazar, v'lo isha, because we assume that Elazar has to shecht it. Zor nami, so too, as Rav said before, Elazar v'lo Zor has to be shechted by a Kohen and not a Zor. And the Mir Hashem in the next year, we're going to continue from here.